Tristan Brübach was born on October 3, 1984 in the city of Frankfurt, Germany. He was the only child of Bernd and Iris Brübach. When Tristan was 9 years old, his mother Iris tragically passed away. Bernd was left alone to care for Tristan all by himself. Tristan attended Walter Koch Primary School, in the borough of Hoogst. Following his completion of the 5th grade, he moved on to a master's school in the neighboring district of Sindlingen. Since Bernd was now a single father, he had to pick up extra hours at work in order to support the small family. So, oftentimes, Tristan was left in the care of his grandmother, but he became independent at an early age. He was no stranger to walking around the neighborhood in the afternoons and evenings by himself, even though the area they lived in was a bit rough. And Tristan became well accustomed to using public transportation to get around. At home, Tristan was known as being very sullen, unsurprisingly so, with the hardship he had endured. He usually kept to himself, and occupied his free time with video games, dedicating hundreds of hours to his PlayStation, as well as to his pet rabbit, Hoppelfried. He adored animals, and was known to strike up a conversation with every pet owner he encountered on the street. By his preteen years, Tristan had developed a reputation for being very independent, kind of a street kid, in that regard. He even began smoking cigarettes in an effort to fit in with older children, but was known to be bullied, and was beat up by a few kids in the neighborhood. Many would later recall that he was very impressionable, despite his apparent confidence, a trait which many would later attribute to the early loss of his mother. On the morning of March 26, 1998, Tristan woke up and left for school on the last day before Easter holidays. At 8 a.m., he called his father complaining of back pain, which he claimed was due to a small injury the day before. Thinking that his son was just trying to skip school, Bernd told Tristan to go to school first, and that they could go visit the doctor later during the day. Tristan left for school that morning, but took his sweet time doing so. Apparently, while walking to school, he encountered a friend of his named Boris. The two boys spent some time smoking cigarettes on the school ground before heading to class. The first couple of hours went by regularly, with Tristan attending a few periods. It was only after lunch that he told a teacher his back was hurting, and he requested an early release so that he could visit a doctor. Tristan was granted his early release from class, and left school at around 1:30 p.m., less than 15 minutes after returning from lunch. He then hopped aboard a bus, sitting in the back seat, as he always did. When the bus came to a stop, Tristan got out, and walked the remaining distance to a nearby train station, where he would spend the next few hours of his life. The Frankfurt Hoogst train station, located just a few blocks away from the main river, is one of the largest and busiest train stations in all of Frankfurt. The area is often full of people passing through on their way to work or school, and Tristan soon became just another young face in the crowd. At around 1:46 p.m., roughly 16 minutes after leaving school, Tristan was spotted on CCTV footage from a shop inside the train station. Standing nearby him at the time was an adult male, but the footage was too blurry to make out a description of the man. Between 2:15 and 2:45 p.m., Tristan was seen by two separate classmates at the train station. These classmates couldn't offer up specific details, such as the time or location they saw Tristan, but both claimed that he appeared to be alone. Around 3:20 p.m., Tristan encountered a woman who was walking her dog at a nearby park. The park was just a few blocks away from the Frankfurt Hoogst train station, and the woman claimed that Tristan was sitting on a park bench smoking a cigarette, when she walked by with a small dog. According to her, Tristan seemed like a charming young man who enjoyed petting her dog. Later, she went on to claim that she noticed two men, probably foreign, sitting down on either side of Tristan on the park bench. At 3:30 p.m., three teenagers wished to take the shortcut through the Liederbach tunnel in order to go to a sports field, when they saw something unusual. They claimed that they saw a man leaning over something they could not make out. The kids felt uncomfortable, so they decided to turn back, and walked around the tunnel rather than through it. A small group of kids had been walking towards the tunnel on their way to an after-school daycare. It was around 5 p.m., when they passed through the tunnel unassumingly, and found Tristan's body within it. The kids quickly ran out of the tunnel to their daycare to inform the staff about the grisly discovery. The staff, perhaps not believing them entirely, followed them back to the tunnel, where they saw the body of a brutally battered young man. Almost immediately, they phoned the police. Police would later describe the crime scene as one of the worst ever discovered in Frankfurt. Some even proclaimed it the most gruesome in post-war Germany. The wounds inflicted on the deceased were of such extreme brutality that authorities could not identify the body. It was only through a label inside the boy's school bag that the police were able to confirm that the body belonged to Tristan Brübach. It was revealed that Tristan was beaten and strangled until he fell unconscious. He was then dragged from the edge of the river into the tunnel. Autopsy revealed that the cause of death was a deep cut to the throat that ran from ear to ear, and it was so extreme that his spine was visible. He was also stabbed numerous times. Investigators later made public the horrific details of how the killer mutilated the body. They noted that chunks of flesh from Tristan's body were cut off, along with his testicles. Police suspect that the killer took the missing body parts with him. Tristan was placed in a sleeping position in the tunnel, with one of his shoes resting on top of him. The murder weapon was found on a stone close to the scene. Authorities believe that the murder and the mutilation of Tristan must have taken the killer approximately 15 minutes to carry out. Forensic investigators found a bloody fingerprint at the scene, which they assumed belonged to the killer. The 3 teenagers who saw the unidentified man in the tunnel were questioned, and it became apparent that they had likely witnessed Tristan's murder without realizing it at the time. There was another young female witness who saw a similar-looking man in the tunnel. These witness statements helped the police in understanding the timeline of events, and also with creating a composite sketch of the person suspected to have killed Tristan. German police believe that the suspect was aged between 25 and 35 years, was approximately 5 foot 7 inches tall and was a Caucasian with light-colored eyes. Witnesses reported that he had a disheveled appearance with his long blonde hair tied in a ponytail under a hat. The suspect had a distinctive scar below his left nostril, which could have been due to an injury or a repaired cleft lip. Authorities believe the killer to have had pedophilic tendencies and possibly already knew Tristan Brübach. In the days leading up to his death, Tristan was seen talking to some older men by some witnesses, including a teacher from his school. After receiving physical descriptions of these older men, authorities found that one of them matched the description of the man seen in the tunnel. However, this person was never identified. While the boy's friends and family continued to mourn, investigators struggled to make sense of everything. Why had a vicious killer targeted this 13-year-old? Seemingly at random. And why had this killer mutilated the body so terribly after death? Was it part of a ritual of some kind? Or was the killer a psychotic killer, with an interest in cannibalism? As investigators mulled over all of these possibilities, they were surprised to learn that the potential killer had made contact with them. On April 7, 1998, just a few days after Tristan's funeral, the police received a strange phone call from a payphone in the Hoeks train station, the same station that Tristan had visited hours before his death. As soon as the police receptionist answered the call, the caller confessed to killing Tristan Brübach. Without being too descriptive, the caller said that he was the one who killed Tristan, and that he was calling from inside Hoeks train station. He went on to describe his appearance, stating that he was 180 centimeters tall and that he had long black hair. He then abruptly ended the call, telling the police to arrest him. Some in the media later said that the killer had used this phone call to distract the police from looking for a man fitting the description provided by eyewitnesses. Locals have stated that the caller sounded like he was under the influence of alcohol or drugs, but it was clear that the man had a local Frankfurt accent. By the time police arrived at the train station, they could not identify or find the caller. It is unknown if they were able to obtain any evidence at the station itself, such as CCTV footage or fingerprints of the caller. In March of 1999, almost a year after the murder, Tristan's backpack was found in a forest roughly 25 kilometers or 16 miles away from the scene of the crime. Inside the backpack, police found a road map of Germany, which was printed in the Czech language. Since Tristan did not speak Czech, this was ruled to be an item that belonged to someone else. Authorities began investigating in both Czech Republic and in Slovakia. However, their efforts were in vain. When this information was presented to the media, an eyewitness stepped forward. She claimed that at around the time of Tristan's murder, she had been in that same wooded area, and had encountered a bizarre man not far away from where the backpack was found. The eyewitness described this man as incredibly odd and said that he ranted about many bizarre things. According to the woman, this strange man also mentioned that he had recently come to Germany from the Czech Republic. However, when investigators began reaching out to French authorities, they discovered that this man had already been identified, and had an absolutely solid alibi for the dates of Tristan's murder, due to his hospital documentation. In October of 1999, Tristan's grandmother decided to pay his grave a visit in the cemetery he was resting in. When she got to Tristan's grave, however, she was horrified to find that it had been desecrated by a gravedigger. They had set down a plastic tarp next to the grave, and transferred the dirt over on top of it. They were unable to reach his coffin, but had still dug through several feet of dirt, and left the grave open and exposed. It was unknown when the grave had been disturbed, but it was only discovered by Tristan's grandmother in October of 1999. Investigators later stated that they believed the incident was at the hands of a mentally unstable man, who had nothing to do with the death of Tristan Brübach. In the months following the murder, children reported sightings of a disheveled homeless man hanging around the Hoeks train station. The homeless man allegedly interacted with various different children, asking them to buy him stuff, and was also reportedly giving gifts to them. One of Tristan's classmates had stated many years later that this was a person who was known to the locals, as he often made them uncomfortable and was intimidating. He said that the man followed him on his way home on many separate occasions. The children had made many claims about the man in the past, but their fears were not taken seriously, as the adults didn't believe that he was a threat. However, after Tristan's murder, their claims were taken more seriously. But when police began searching the area for the homeless man, he had apparently disappeared. On May 19, 2016, the Hessen State Police in Wiesbaden announced that Manfred Seel was being looked into as a suspect. Manfred Seel was an ordinary German man who lived an uneventful life, worked at the same job for decades, raised a normal family, never had a criminal record, and was a respected member of society. However, after his death in 2014, his daughter was looking through his belongings in a rented storage facility, and found human remains and diaries containing graphic descriptions and sketches of murders. The police are certain that Seel murdered at least 5 women, and perhaps as many as 9, primarily sex workers, drug addicts and people suffering from mental illnesses, between 1971 and 2004. Seel was only considered a potential suspect because he and Brübach lived in the same area, not because there was any evidence linking him to Brübach's murder. Brübach does not fit Seel's victim profile in terms of age and gender. However, Seel did exhibit sexual sadism in his presumed murders, and kept the genitals of some of his victims. In October 2017, the Frankfurt police announced that Seel had been excluded as a suspect in Brübach's murder. Over the years, many theories have continued to linger in the case of Tristan's murder. Since the investigation was reopened in 2013, 2 distinct theories have risen to the top of the pack. The first regards the possibility that the killer was someone that Tristan knew, or was familiar with. This was perhaps someone that had become an acquaintance of his in the months, weeks, or even days before his murder. It's possible that he met someone, and didn't tell anyone, because the mere association with an older man would be frowned upon by his friends and family. Especially if the man was unstable, criminal, or homeless. One of the most popular theories among locals was that Tristan Brübach, who had a bit of a reputation for being independent, had gotten involved in some kind of drug dealing. Perhaps, he had begun hanging around older kids who dealt drugs, and in the process, he had exposed himself to more violent criminals. Unfortunately, there is no evidence to back this up. Tristan was pretty independent for his age, but he wasn't spending every waking moment on the streets. More often than not, he was at home, and the rumor that he was involved in gang activities was just that, a rumor. There were other rumors floating around, that Tristan was a victim of sexual abuse and was involved in a prostitution ring. Many web sleuths claim that back pain is indicative of some kind of sexual trauma. However, Tristan was a pretty active kid, and back pain could also be indicative of a kid going through puberty and growing incrementally. Other theories regarding sexual abuse tie into Tristan's independence, and the eyewitness descriptions which stated that Tristan seemed to be waiting for someone around the train station on the day he was murdered. However, most of these theories started with rumor mongering, and none have turned out to be based on facts. The investigation to find the killer of Tristan Brübach was at the time the largest of its kind in all of Germany. Many liken the investigation to that of America's John Benet Ramsey, or the UK's Madeleine McCann, the kind of case that consumes the nation. In the aftermath, more than 10,000 men in the vicinity of the murder were fingerprinted. Most of these were men between the age of 15 and 45, who were voluntarily asked to submit their fingerprints. Almost 99% of men in the Frankfurt borough of Höchst complied. Over 24,000 witness statements and testimonies were collected. The sketch of the suspect was provided to more than 80 prisons and institutions throughout Germany. Despite all these efforts, the police struggled to make any solid progress in the case. Investigators even inquired into possibilities regarding the suspect's cleft lip. They reached out to medical facilities throughout the region, hoping that one of them would have records of some man with a severe cleft lip or scar on that side of his face. But they had no such luck. The DNA evidence, which included the bloody fingerprint found at the scene, have been shared with other criminal agencies, such as Germany's Federal Criminal Police, Interpol, and even the Behavioral Analysis Unit of the FBI. However, none of the agencies were able to provide any significant help. The murder of Tristan Brübach remains a very unique case. A young man, attacked in broad daylight and in public, is stabbed and brutally beaten, followed by a gruesome period of brutal mutilation and dismemberment. There is not a single other case that matches up with Tristan's, neither in modus operandi, nor in victim profile. The tunnel that Tristan was killed in has since been closed off, but the story continues to haunt those in the region. His story has become an urban legend among local children and teenagers, who exaggerate or embellish certain details to scare one another. Tristan's only surviving relative, his father, Bernd Brübach, died in December of 2014 at the age of 59, having never remarried or had any other children. At the time of his death, he remained hopeful that justice would be served for his murdered son. A €20,000 reward still exists for information that may lead to Tristan's killer. However, until such a time, the story of Tristan Brübach remains unresolved. If you have any thoughts or information you'd like to share about Tristan Brübach's case, leave a comment below. Thank you for watching, and we hope you found our video interesting. Like, comment and subscribe for more fascinating unsolved mysteries.